You can't sit here. This is first class. Laura Mitchell's voice cut through the quiet cabin, her stare fixed on the black man in seat 2A. Malcolm Brooks looked up, calm but rigid. No mistake. He held out his ticket. Seat 2A, confirmed. Laura glanced once, lips curling. How did you get this ticket? Silence thickened. Passengers slowed. A man muttered under his breath. Someone lifted a phone to record. Malcolm's grip tightened around the ticket. Sweat traced his collar. He'd seen that look before, doubt wrapped in politeness. But this time, he wouldn't shrink. I have every right to be here, he said quietly. Laura motioned to a crew member. That small gesture said it all. Troublemaker. Whispers rippled through the cabin. Probably fake. Holding everyone up. Malcolm didn't move. His eyes stayed steady. His hand brushed the badge in his pocket, the one that could end this in seconds. But he waited. In just a few minutes, they'd all know who they were really talking to. Laura moved toward him with the precision of someone following a script she'd written herself. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step deliberate. She stopped at row 2, her eyes fixed on Malcolm's face, not his seat number. Excuse me, sir. May I see your boarding pass? Her voice was polite, but the undertone was unmistakable. This wasn't a request, it was an inspection. Malcolm looked up from his laptop, his expression unchanged. He unlocked his phone and held it toward her, the digital boarding pass filling the screen. First class, seat 2A, confirmation number clearly visible. Laura studied it longer than necessary, her eyes narrowing as if searching for a flaw in the pixels themselves. She tapped her tablet, cross-referencing the information with a level of scrutiny reserved for suspected criminals. And how did you purchase this ticket, sir? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Malcolm kept his voice even, professional, the tone of a man who had navigated these waters before. Through the Atlas Air website, standard booking process. Laura's lips pressed into a thin line. She leaned closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. I'll need to verify the payment method. Do you have the credit card you used? Behind her, another flight attendant, a woman with dark hair, glanced over, curiosity flickering across her face. Malcolm reached into his wallet and produced a platinum card, the metal catching the overhead light. Laura took it, held it up, examined the embossed name. Malcolm Brooks. She turned it over, checked the signature panel, then walked back toward the galley without a word. Across the aisle, the passenger in 1A, a man in his 50s wearing a tailored suit, sipped his champagne, oblivious. No one had asked him for identification. No one had questioned his right to be there. A flight attendant appeared at his elbow with a warm towel and a smile that reached her eyes. Can I get you anything else, Mr. Patterson? The contrast was surgical in its precision. Malcolm watched it all. He didn't react, didn't shift in his seat, didn't allow the irritation to surface. Instead, he opened the Notes app on his phone and typed a single line. 2:47 p.m. Laura Mitchell, differential treatment confirmed. He angled the screen away from the aisle and took a discreet photo of her name tag as she returned. This wasn't personal. This was documentation. Laura came back holding his credit card between two fingers as if it might contaminate her. I'll need to call our financial verification team. Please wait. She didn't wait for his response. She walked away, leaving Malcolm sitting in silence while other passengers boarded around him. A black woman in row 3 caught his eye, her expression a mixture of recognition and exhaustion. She knew this routine. They all did. Malcolm pulled out his phone again and sent a text to his executive assistant, Sarah Williams. Phase 1 active, recording initiated, legal standing by? The reply came within seconds. Confirmed, CEO. Documentation protocol engaged. He set the phone face down on the armrest and stared at the seat in front of him. His pulse was steady. His breathing was controlled. But beneath the calm surface, something else simmered. Not anger at the indignity, but resolve. This was exactly what he needed to see. This was the proof that 200 complaints hadn't been exaggerations. The system was broken, and it was breaking people every single day. Laura returned 10 minutes later, her face tight with frustration. She handed back his card without meeting his eyes. "Everything checks out," she said, the words clipped. She didn't apologize. She didn't acknowledge the time wasted or the suspicion cast. She simply turned and walked away, her shoulders rigid with something that looked like resentment. Malcolm slid the card back into his wallet and opened his laptop. Around him, the cabin filled with passengers, families, business travelers, couples settling into their seats. None of them knew what was unfolding in row 2. None of them knew that the quiet man in the window seat was cataloging every microaggression, every dismissive glance, every unspoken assumption. He was building a case, and the evidence was piling up faster than he'd anticipated. Laura disappeared into the galley and returned with reinforcement. David Harrison, lead flight attendant, followed her with the stride of someone accustomed to authority. 3 gold stripes gleamed on his shoulders. He stopped at row 2 and looked down at Malcolm with practiced politeness that couldn't mask the condescension beneath. "Good afternoon, sir. I understand there's been some confusion about your seat assignment." There was no confusion. Malcolm's boarding pass was legitimate, his payment verified. But David's phrasing reframed the situation, turning Malcolm's rightful presence into a problem. Malcolm met his gaze. "No confusion. I have a confirmed first-class ticket for seat 2A. His voice remained level, controlled, the tone of someone who'd navigated these waters before. David smiled without warmth. "Of course. I just need to verify a few details. Where did you purchase this ticket?" It was Laura's question, rephrased. "Through the Atlas Air website, standard booking." "And the purpose of your travel?" The question was intrusive, unnecessary. First-class passengers weren't typically interrogated. Malcolm didn't point this out. "Business." David nodded slowly, weighing the answer. "Do you have the physical credit card you used?" Malcolm had already shown it to Laura. The information was verified. But he reached into his wallet again and produced the platinum card. David examined it with exaggerated care, then pulled out his phone. "I'll call our finance department to confirm this transaction. Just a precaution. I'm sure you understand." Malcolm understood perfectly. This precaution was never applied to white passengers. David was performing his suspicion, turning Malcolm's presence into spectacle. Every second of delay signaled that he didn't belong here. David walked away, phone pressed to his ear. Minutes ticked by. Passengers glanced over, curious, uncomfortable, pretending not to notice. Malcolm sat motionless, hands folded, breathing steady. His mind raced with calculation. He typed a message. "Escalation in progress. On schedule. Prepare legal documentation." The reply came instantly. "Standing by, CEO. Recording devices active." The time read 3:02 p.m. Boarding closed in 18 minutes. David remained on the phone, occasionally glancing back as if expecting Malcolm to crack, to leave voluntarily. But Malcolm wasn't moving. This wasn't about one seat. This was about a pattern that needed exposure. David finally returned, Malcolm's card still in hand. His expression was tight, frustrated. "Everything appears to be in order." He handed back the card without apology, without acknowledgement. "Thank you for your patience." Patience. As if Malcolm had caused the delay. David turned away. Laura remained nearby, hovering like a sentry. Malcolm returned to his laptop and began typing. 3:02 p.m. David Harrison. Secondary verification without cause. Financial department contacted despite prior confirmation. Pattern consistent with discriminatory profiling. Each sentence became another brick in the case he was building. The cabin filled around him. Families settled in. Business travelers stowed luggage. Flight attendants smiled and assisted. Everyone except Laura, who stood by the galley with crossed arms, watching Malcolm as if he were an unsolved problem. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Ron Fletcher. We're experiencing a minor delay due to a security concern. We appreciate your patience." The announcement was vague enough to sound routine, specific enough to draw attention. Heads turned toward Malcolm. The implication was clear. Ron Fletcher emerged from the cockpit moments later, tall, broad-shouldered, 4 gold stripes on his uniform. He walked down the aisle with the confidence of absolute authority. When he reached row 2, he stopped and crossed his arms, looking down at Malcolm with unmistakable disdain. "Sir, I'm Captain Fletcher. I need to ask you a few questions." His voice carried through the cabin, loud enough for passengers several rows back. This wasn't private. It was public interrogation. Malcolm looked up, his face calm. "Of course, Captain." Hands visible, posture relaxed. Any sign of resistance would be weaponized. Ron's eyes swept over Malcolm. Clothes, watch, carry on. "Are you certain you're in the correct seat?" The question was absurd. Malcolm had been verified twice. But Ron asked anyway, tone suggesting he knew the answer and found it suspicious. "Yes, Captain. Seat 2A, first class. Confirmed and paid." Malcolm kept his voice steady. He reached for his phone, but Ron held up a hand. "I've reviewed your documentation. What concerns me is how a ticket like this ended up in your possession. Not how you purchased it, how it ended up in your possession." As if Malcolm had acquired it through theft rather than legitimate transaction. The cabin went quiet. Passengers strained to listen. Some looked away. Others watched openly. Malcolm felt the weight of collective judgment. "I purchased it through your website, Captain, using my credit card. Verified twice in the past 20 minutes. Courteous but firm. Facts, not begging. Ron's jaw tightened. "I've been flying 30 years. I know when something doesn't add up." He leaned forward, voice lowered but still audible. "First-class tickets aren't cheap. In my experience, what certain people..." He paused. "Certain people don't usually have the means for this kind of travel." The words landed like a slap. A woman in row 3 shook her head. She'd heard this before. Malcolm's hands remained folded, but his pulse quickened, not from fear, from sheer audacity. "Captain Fletcher, I've complied with every request. My ticket is valid. My payment confirmed. What else do you need?" Ron straightened. "What I need is full cooperation, because right now, this looks suspicious. If I determine there's fraud or deception, you will be removed and turned over to airport security." He let the threat sink in. "Do you understand?" Malcolm met his gaze. "I understand you're doing your job, but these procedures seem selectively applied." He gestured subtly toward the passenger in 1A. Champagne served without question. No verification, no captain interrogating him publicly. Ron's face darkened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm observing a pattern, that's all." Malcolm's voice remained calm. "But perhaps these observations aren't welcome." Ron stepped back, rigid with barely controlled anger. "This is my aircraft. If I believe there's a security risk, any risk, I have authority to remove passengers, no questions asked." He turned to David. "Get security up here, now." David nodded, pulling out his radio. "Security to Gate 12, situation requiring immediate assistance." The words crackled through cabin speakers. Passengers murmured. Phones appeared. Cameras angling toward Malcolm. This was spectacle, broadcast in real time. Malcolm typed a message. "Phase 2 initiated. Legal team stand by. Document everything." He set the phone down and waited. Expression neutral. He wouldn't give them the reaction they wanted. Ron stood at the front, arms crossed, watching like a guard. Laura hovered nearby, nervousness replaced with vindication. David coordinated security arrival, and Malcolm sat surrounded by accusing eyes. "These procedures," Malcolm said softly, "seem designed for a very specific outcome. I wonder if everyone here recognizes that. His voice carried to nearby passengers. But I suppose we'll see who's really being protected and who's being targeted. Ron's eyes narrowed. You'd be wise to remain silent, sir. Malcolm didn't respond. He'd made his point. The system was revealing itself, and everyone was watching. The cabin door opened, and Dana Lopez stepped aboard. She wore the dark uniform of airport security, badge gleaming on her chest, hand resting near the equipment on her belt. Her expression was professional, neutral, the face of someone trained to assess and neutralize threats. She scanned the cabin until her eyes found Malcolm, then moved toward him with purpose. Ron met her halfway, speaking in low tones that didn't quite reach Malcolm's ears. Dana nodded, her gaze never leaving row 2. When Ron finished, she approached Malcolm directly, stopping in the aisle beside his seat. Her presence was imposing, calculated to intimidate. Sir, I'm Officer Lopez with Airport Security. I need you to stand up and step into the aisle. Her voice was firm, commanding. Not a request, an order. Malcolm looked up at her, his expression unchanged. Officer, I have a valid ticket and confirmed seat. I've cooperated with every verification request. What's the specific security concern? Dana's jaw tightened slightly. Sir, I'm not going to ask again. Stand up, now. Malcolm didn't move. He kept his hands visible on the armrests, his voice level. I will not voluntarily leave my seat without a clear explanation of what regulation I've violated. I have rights as a passenger. The tension in the cabin shifted. This was no longer just uncomfortable. It was confrontational. Passengers leaned forward. Phones rose higher. Someone in row 5 had started a Facebook live stream, the viewer count climbing rapidly in the corner of the screen. 50 people watching, then 200, then 1,000. Ron stepped forward, positioning himself beside Dana. Mr. Brooks, you're creating a disturbance. If you refuse to comply with security, we will remove you by force if necessary. I'm sitting quietly in my assigned seat, Malcolm replied. The only disturbance is the one being created around me. His voice carried through the cabin, clear and deliberate. I'm being treated this way for one reason, and everyone here knows what it is. A voice cut through from row 4. This is ridiculous. The man has a ticket. The speaker was a white passenger in business casual, his face flushed with indignation. I've been flying for 20 years and I've never seen anyone treated like this. Ron turned toward him. Sir, I need you to stay out of this. This is a security matter. Security matter? The man stood up, gesturing toward Malcolm. He's been sitting there peacefully this entire time. You're the ones making a scene. Another voice joined, this time from row 6, a woman with graying hair. Are you going to explain what he actually did wrong? Because from where I'm sitting, all I see is harassment. But not everyone agreed. A passenger in row 7, a man in his 60s, spoke up. Maybe if he just cooperated instead of making everything difficult, we could all get on with our flight. Some of us have places to be. He has cooperated. The woman in row 3, the one who'd shaken her head earlier, was on her feet now, her voice sharp with anger. They've checked his ticket twice, called finance, brought the captain down here. What more do you want? The cabin erupted into overlapping arguments. Supporters of Malcolm shouted at passengers who blamed him for the delay. Flight attendants tried to restore order, voices lost in the chaos. Laura stood frozen near the galley, eyes wide. David moved between rows, attempting to calm people down. Nothing worked. Dana raised her voice above the noise. Everyone needs to sit down and be quiet, or we'll start removing passengers for interfering with crew operations. The threat silenced some, but not all. The tension hung thick, suffocating. Malcolm remained seated, watching it unfold. This was what he'd expected. The system under pressure, revealing its cracks. He pulled out his phone and sent another message. Escalation complete. Situation critical. Prepare for phase 3. Then he opened his email and began drafting something longer, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. Ron leaned down, his face inches from Malcolm's. "You're making a mistake. Walk away now, and maybe we can resolve this quietly. Push this further, and I guarantee you'll regret it." Malcolm met his eyes. "Captain Fletcher, I'm not the one who needs to walk away from a mistake. But by all means, continue. I'm documenting everything." Ron's face flushed red. He straightened and turned to Dana. "Remove him. Use whatever force is necessary." Dana hesitated, just for a second, but long enough for Malcolm to notice. She'd seen the cameras. She knew this was being live-streamed to thousands now. Whatever happened next would be scrutinized frame by frame. She keyed her radio. "Lopez to command. I need backup at Gate 12. Situation is escalating." 2 more security officers appeared within minutes. The cabin felt smaller, more claustrophobic. 3 uniformed officers surrounded Malcolm's seat, while Ron stood at the front like a general overseeing a battlefield. David made an announcement over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, this flight will not depart until this matter is resolved. We apologize for the inconvenience, but passenger safety is our top priority." The words triggered another wave of anger. Passengers began shouting, at Malcolm, at Ron, at each other. "Just let him fly. Get him off so we can leave. This is discrimination. This is a delay we don't need." Malcolm sat in the eye of the storm, unnaturally calm. His phone buzzed. A message from Alice Richardson, his CFO. "Media outlets picking up the live streams. This is going viral. Legal is ready. Say the word." He typed back, "Not yet. Let it build. They need to see it all." Dana positioned herself directly in front of Malcolm, her hand moving toward his arm. "Sir, final warning. Stand up, or we will physically remove you." Malcolm looked up at her, then at Ron, then at the cameras pointed toward him from every direction. He spoke clearly, his voice cutting through the noise. "I am a paying passenger. I have violated no laws. I have threatened no one. And yet I'm being treated like a criminal because of the color of my skin. Let the record show that I am not resisting. I am asserting my rights." Dana grabbed his arm. Malcolm didn't pull away, but he didn't stand either. His body remained passive, non-threatening. "You're assaulting me," he said calmly, "and it's being recorded by dozens of witnesses." Ron moved closer, his patience exhausted. "That's it. Get him out of here." The second officer reached for Malcolm's other arm. The cabin exploded with shouts. The live stream viewer count hit 50,000. Comments flooded in. Outrage, support, condemnation, disbelief. Hashtags began trending. Atlas, air racism. Bach first class. While black. Boycott Atlas. And then Malcolm's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he recognized instantly. He held up his free hand. "I need to take this call. It's urgent." Dana didn't release his arm. "Sir, you don't get to make phone calls right now." Malcolm kept his eyes on Ron. "Captain Fletcher, this call is from the office of Atlas Air's Chief Financial Officer. I strongly suggest you allow me to answer it." Ron hesitated. Something in Malcolm's tone had shifted, still calm, but with an undercurrent of authority that hadn't been there before. "Fine. Answer it. But this doesn't change anything." Malcolm lifted the phone to his ear, putting it on speaker so everyone nearby could hear. Alice Richardson's voice came through, crisp and professional. "Mr. Brooks, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Are you able to speak freely?" "I am," Malcolm said. "Though I'm currently being detained by Atlas Air Security and threatened with forcible removal from my seat." There was a pause. Then Alice spoke again, her words measured and deliberate. "Can you confirm your location and the names of the personnel involved?" "Gate 12, Flight 447. Captain Ron Fletcher, Lead Flight Attendant David Harrison, Flight Attendant Laura Mitchell, and Security Officer Dana Lopez." Another pause. Longer this time, Ron's expression shifted from confident to confused. Dana's grip on Malcolm's arm loosened slightly. Alice's voice returned. "Captain Fletcher, are you able to hear me?" Ron stepped forward, his face tight. "This is Captain Fletcher. Who is this?" "This is Alice Richardson, Chief Financial Officer of Atlas Air, and I'm ordering you to release Mr. Brooks immediately and step away." Ron's confusion turned to irritation. "With all due respect, ma'am, I don't take orders from corporate during security operations. This passenger is being removed for cause." "Captain Fletcher," Alice said, her voice hardening, "the passenger you're attempting to remove is Malcolm Brooks, CEO of Atlas Air, your employer, and if you don't release him in the next 10 seconds, your career ends today." The cabin went silent, absolutely silent. Every conversation stopped. Every camera focused on Ron's face as the color drained from it. Ron's hand trembled as he reached for his phone. His face had shifted from authoritative command to something closer to panic. He looked at the device, then at Malcolm, as if hoping for a different reality. Alice Richardson's voice continued through Malcolm's speaker. "Captain Fletcher, check your company email. You have 30 seconds. Ron's fingers fumbled across his screen. His eyes scanned the message, and whatever he read made his shoulders sag. The email header was visible. Urgent, executive identification confirmation. Attached was Malcolm's employee badge, executive bio, and a direct order from the board of directors. Dana Lopez released Malcolm's arm and stepped back. David Harrison went pale. Laura stood frozen, hand covering her mouth. The security officers exchanged uncertain glances. Malcolm stood slowly, smoothing his jacket. He ended the call with Alice and reached inside his jacket, pulling out the ID badge he'd carried the entire time. He held it up so everyone could see. Malcolm Brooks, Chief Executive Officer, Atlas Air. "For the past 3 months," Malcolm said, his voice carrying through the cabin with quiet authority, "Atlas Air has received over 200 complaints from passengers of color regarding discriminatory treatment. 200 incidents where people were questioned, delayed, humiliated, or removed without cause. When I brought these to leadership, some dismissed them as exaggerations." He paused. Every eye was on him. Live stream viewer counts pushed past 200,000. "I decided to see for myself. I booked a ticket under my own name, used my credit card, followed every standard procedure. I dressed like any business traveler. I carried legitimate documentation, and I sat in a seat I legally purchased." He gestured toward 2A. "What happened next is what happens to black passengers every day." Ron tried to speak. "Mr. Brooks, I didn't know—" Malcolm held up a hand. "You didn't need to know who I was, Captain Fletcher. You needed to treat me like a human being. That shouldn't require executive credentials." He turned to the cabin. "Every interaction you witnessed was documented. The differential treatment compared to white passengers was documented. The racial bias underlying every crew decision was documented. Our legal team is reviewing it all now." David stepped forward, voice shaking. "Sir, we were following protocols." "The protocols are the problem," Malcolm interrupted, "and you applied them selectively based on race. That's what I needed to prove." He held up his phone. Dozens of photos, timestamps, videos, meticulously organized. Laura began crying quietly. Malcolm looked at her, expression softening but not relenting. "Miss Mitchell, you decided I didn't belong here. You saw my skin and assumed fraud. That assumption, repeated thousands of times across thousands of flights, has consequences." Dana cleared her throat. "Mr. Brooks, I was called here by the crew." "You didn't question their assessment," Malcolm said. "You saw a black man, heard suspicious passenger, and moved to removal without investigating. That's implicit bias, Officer Lopez." Ron found his voice again. "Sir, if we'd known you were conducting an audit, that's exactly the point, Captain." Malcolm's voice rose slightly. "Your behavior should not change based on who's watching or who has power. Every passenger deserves the respect you'd show a CEO, but that's not what happens. And now the world has seen why." He took a breath. This flight is canceled. All passengers will be rebooked at no charge with full compensation. The three of you are suspended immediately pending investigation. Officer Lopez, your agency will receive a detailed report." Ron's face went gray. "Mr. Brooks, please. I have a family. 15 years with this company. And in those 15 years, how many passengers did you treat like this? How many were too afraid to fight back?" Ron had no answer. Malcolm picked up his laptop bag. He walked past Ron, past Dana, past David and Laura. At the cabin door, he turned back. "To the passengers who defended me, thank you. To those who blamed me for the delay, I hope you'll reflect on why you assumed I was the problem." He stepped into the jetway. Behind him, the cabin erupted, stunned conversation, frantic calls, passengers gathering belongings. Live streams continued broadcasting. Within minutes, news outlets picked up the story. Malcolm walked through the terminal, expression calm, pace unhurried. Airport staff stared, some recognizing him from videos already spreading. He didn't stop to explain. He had a company to reform and a system to dismantle. This was only the beginning. The emergency board meeting convened 2 hours later in Atlas Air's downtown headquarters. Malcolm sat at the head of the conference table, his laptop open, the evidence displayed across 3 mounted screens. Alice Richardson sat to his right, the company's general counsel to his left. Across from them, the heads of human resources, operations, and legal affairs reviewed the footage in silence. Their faces grew progressively more grim as the videos played. Laura's initial suspicion, David's invasive questions, Ron's thinly veiled racial remarks, Dana's immediate escalation to force. When the final clip ended, Malcolm closed his laptop. "This is not an isolated incident. This is systemic, and it ends today." The director of human resources, a woman named Jennifer Torres, spoke first. "The evidence is incontrovertible. We have clear violations of company policy, federal anti-discrimination law, and basic human decency." She opened a folder containing personnel files. "Captain Ron Fletcher has been with us 15 years. His record shows 3 prior complaints of discriminatory behavior, all dismissed after cursory review. That pattern of negligence stops now." Malcolm nodded. "Recommendations?" "Immediate termination," Jennifer said without hesitation. "And we're filing a formal complaint with the Federal Aviation Administration to review his pilot certification. His conduct demonstrates a fundamental lack of judgment incompatible with command authority." The general counsel added, "The FAA takes discrimination seriously, especially when it compromises passenger safety and crew integrity. They'll likely suspend his license pending investigation. Given the evidence, permanent revocation is probable." Malcolm made a note. "Laura Mitchell and David Harrison?" "Mitchell is terminated effective immediately," Jennifer continued. "She initiated the discriminatory treatment and her actions are indefensible. Harrison is more complex. He followed Mitchell's lead but escalated unnecessarily. I recommend termination with a 5-year ban from employment in any airline capacity. His supervisory role makes his failure more egregious." Alice interjected, "What about Officer Lopez?" "Airport security operates independently," the general counsel explained, "but we're terminating our contract with their agency and filing a formal complaint with airport administration. Lopez failed to exercise independent judgment and defaulted to racial profiling. That's unacceptable for someone in law enforcement." Malcolm leaned back. "I want every decision documented, every termination letter copied to the FAA, the Department of Transportation, and the NAACP. Full transparency. No backroom settlements, no NDAs. This company will not protect people who harm our passengers." Within the hour, the letters went out. Ron Fletcher's termination was delivered by courier to his home, his pilot credentials flagged in the FAA database for immediate review. Laura Mitchell received hers via registered mail, accompanied by notice that her personnel file would reflect termination for cause, making future employment in aviation virtually impossible. David Harrison's letter included the 5-year industry ban, a consequence that would follow him to any airline, any airport, any travel-related position. By evening, Atlas Air's official statement hit the wire. Today, Atlas Air CEO Malcolm Brooks personally experienced the discrimination that too many passengers of color face when they fly. What began as an internal audit became a public reckoning. We have terminated 3 employees whose actions violated our values and betrayed the trust of our customers. We are implementing immediate reforms to our training, oversight, and accountability systems. We commit to being the airline that leads the industry in equity, dignity, and justice. The statement included links to the full video documentation, 30 minutes of footage showing the entire incident from multiple angles. Malcolm had insisted on complete disclosure, no selective editing, no spin, just the unvarnished truth. The response was immediate and massive. Within 12 hours, the videos accumulated 50 million views across platforms. Major news networks ran segments analyzing every frame. Civil rights organizations issued statements praising Malcolm's courage and Atlas Air's accountability. Competing airlines faced immediate pressure to examine their own practices. Congressional representatives called for hearings on discrimination in air travel, but the backlash was fierce too. Ron Fletcher's family released a statement claiming he'd been set up and entrapped. Anonymous sources questioned whether Malcolm's test was ethical. Some commentators argued that employees shouldn't lose their livelihoods over one mistake. The debate raged across editorial pages and cable news panels. Malcolm appeared on CNN that evening, his first public interview since the incident. The anchor, a black woman named Tracy Williams, asked the question everyone wanted answered. Critics say you manipulated your employees into revealing their biases. How do you respond? Malcolm's answer was measured. I didn't manipulate anyone. I simply existed as a black man in a space where I'm legally entitled to be. If that alone triggers discriminatory treatment, the problem isn't the test. It's the discrimination. No one forced Captain Fletcher to question my finances. No one forced Laura Mitchell to treat me differently than white passengers. They made those choices freely, and those choices had consequences. What do you say to their families? Tracy asked. I have empathy for anyone facing hardship, Malcolm replied. But I also have empathy for the hundreds of passengers whose complaints were ignored, for the families separated because staff assumed fraud, for the professionals who missed career opportunities because they were removed from flights. Those people have families too, and they've been living with consequences for years. The interview went viral. By morning, Atlas Air's stock had dropped 4%, but customer bookings from passengers of color surged 20%. The company was hemorrhaging some customers while gaining fierce loyalty from others. Malcolm had anticipated this. Reform was never comfortable. Change was never cheap, but it was necessary. 3 days after the incident, the FAA announced its findings. Ron Fletcher's pilot license was suspended indefinitely pending a full investigation into whether his discriminatory conduct violated federal aviation safety regulations. The statement noted that pilots must exercise sound judgment free from bias, and that Fletcher's actions raised serious questions about his fitness to command. It was effectively the end of his flying career. 2 weeks later, Malcolm stood before a packed auditorium at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. The audience included activists, journalists, airline employees, and people who'd experienced similar treatment. Over 2 million joined via live stream. Malcolm wore a simple dark suit. When he spoke, his voice was calm, reflective. I didn't do this for personal vindication. I did it because 200 people trusted me with their pain. 200 passengers told me they'd been humiliated, questioned, treated as criminals simply for being black in spaces they had every right to occupy. Some in power told me they were exaggerating. So I tested that theory. I became one of them. He paused. What I learned is they weren't exaggerating at all. What happened on that flight wasn't about me being CEO. It was about me being black. My suit, my briefcase, my platinum card, none of it mattered. I was judged by skin color. That's the reality millions live with every day. His tone became direct. Some ask if I feel guilty about employees who lost jobs. No. They made deliberate choices to treat human beings as less than human. They had training, policies, every opportunity to do right. They chose not to. Choices have consequences. He leaned forward. But this isn't just about punishment. It's about fixing broken systems. Atlas Air has implemented mandatory anti-bias training, oversight with accountability, direct reporting channels without retaliation. We've partnered with civil rights organizations to ensure reforms are meaningful, not performative. His voice strengthened. Dignity is not a luxury. It's a birthright. Every passenger deserves respect, regardless of race, class, appearance. That shouldn't be revolutionary, but in 2025, it still is. Malcolm's expression softened. To everyone made to feel like they don't belong, in a first-class cabin, a boardroom, a neighborhood, I see you. Your experiences are valid. Your anger is justified. You don't have to accept mistreatment. We can demand better. We can build better. And we will. The audience rose in standing ovation. Malcolm simply nodded. Acknowledgement, not celebration. The work had barely begun. Malcolm's voice dropped to a quieter register, shifting from reflection to direct address. So here's what I'm asking each of you, not someday, today. First, if you witness discrimination, on a plane, in a store, anywhere, speak up. Your silence is complicity. Your voice is power. Second, if you experience discrimination, document it. Record it safely. Share your story. Don't let anyone convince you it wasn't real. Third, demand accountability from institutions you support. If your airline tolerates discrimination, make noise. Withdraw business. File complaints. Companies respond to pressure. He paused, a slight smile crossing his face. And finally, never assume you know who someone is based on how they look. The person you're about to dismiss might be the CEO of your company. The audience laughed. But more importantly, they might just be a human being who deserves your respect. That should be reason enough. His voice rose with conviction. We're not asking for special treatment. We're demanding equal treatment. We're not seeking revenge. We're seeking justice. And we will not stop until every person can board a plane without fear of being judged because of who they are. Malcolm's final words rang through the auditorium. Respect knows no color. Dignity has no price. Be the change you want to see. And remember, the person sitting next to you might be more than you think. Treat them accordingly. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Malcolm nodded once and walked off stage, leaving the audience with a challenge and a promise. As he stepped into the Memphis evening, his phone buzzed with messages, stories of discrimination, offers to help, promises to speak up. The movement he'd started on Flight 447 was spreading far beyond one airline. Somewhere above him, planes crisscrossed the sky. And thanks to what happened in Seat 2A, at least one airline was ensuring every passenger would be treated with dignity. The fight wasn't over, but it had begun. And Malcolm Brooks was ready for whatever came next.